How did installing security cameras in your home destroy your family? I installed the cameras because I thought someone was stealing from us. Small things kept disappearing: cash from my wallet, Claire's prescription medication, gift cards we'd received for holidays. My wife blamed herself for misplacing things, but I knew better. Someone in our house was taking what didn't belong to them, and I needed proof before making accusations that could destroy our family. The security company installed 8 cameras throughout our home, covering every room except bathrooms and bedrooms. They connected to an app on my phone with 30 days of rolling footage. I told Claire and our kids, 16-year-old Ethan and 13-year-old Mia, that the cameras were for protection after hearing about break-ins in our neighborhood. Everyone seemed fine with it, even relieved. What I found in those first 3 days of footage didn't just answer my questions about the missing items. It revealed secrets that would tear apart everything I thought I knew about the people I lived with. The cameras showed me the truth, and the truth destroyed us more completely than any theft ever could. The first discovery came on day 2. I was reviewing footage from the previous afternoon when I saw Claire come home early from her job at the medical office, where she worked as a billing coordinator. She went straight to our bedroom, which didn't have a camera, but the hallway camera caught her emerging 20 minutes later, looking flushed and adjusting her clothes. A man I'd never seen before followed her out 30 seconds later. He was younger than her, maybe 30 or 42, wearing a polo shirt with a company logo I couldn't make out. They stood in the hallway talking quietly, and then he kissed her. Not a friendly peck, but a deep kiss with his hand on her waist. Claire kissed him back before walking him downstairs to the front door. The timestamp showed this happened at 2 in the afternoon, 3 hours before she was supposed to be home from work. I watched it 5 times, hoping I was misunderstanding what I was seeing, but there was no other interpretation. My wife of 18 years was having an affair and bringing the man into our home while our children were at school. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. My hands were shaking as I scrolled back through the previous day's footage. There he was again, arriving at 1:30, leaving at 3. I checked the day before that and found the same pattern. Claire had been bringing this man to our house at least 3 times a week for who knows how long. Every afternoon she told me she was working late or running errands after work. She was actually coming home to be with him. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I couldn't process it. But I forced myself to keep watching because I'd installed these cameras to find a thief, and I still hadn't found who was taking our things. I scrolled forward to footage from that same evening, after I'd come home from work. Ethan was in the kitchen making a sandwich when I saw him open the drawer where we kept emergency cash. He pulled out 2 20s, looked around to make sure no one was watching, and slipped them into his pocket. The camera angle was perfect, showing his face clearly, the guilt obvious in how quickly he moved. My son was the thief. Not some stranger, not a friend who'd visited, but Ethan. I kept watching and saw him do it again the next day, taking 3 20s this time. I watched him go into our bathroom and take Claire's anxiety medication from the cabinet. I watched him rifle through my wallet when I left it on the kitchen counter, taking a gift card I'd gotten from work. Every missing item I'd noticed over the past 2 months, Ethan was responsible for all of it. But why? We gave him an allowance. We bought him what he needed. He had a part-time job at the grocery store on weekends. Where was this money going? I fast-forwarded through hours of footage, looking for answers, and found something that made the affair and the stealing seem almost manageable by comparison. On the living room camera, I watched Mia come home from school and go straight to the kitchen. She opened the refrigerator, stared at the food inside for a long moment, then closed it without taking anything. She did this 3 more times over the next hour. Then she went to the bathroom, and I could hear through the audio what she was doing, even though there was no camera. She was throwing up, deliberately, forcing herself to vomit. I'd noticed Mia had lost weight recently. Claire said it was a growth spurt, that teenage girls get self-conscious about their bodies. I'd accepted that explanation because I didn't want to see what was really happening. But the cameras didn't lie. I watched my 13-year-old daughter engage in behavior that could kill her, and I'd been completely blind to it. I sat in my office at 3 in the morning, 3 days after installing the cameras, staring at my phone screen filled with evidence that my entire family was falling apart. My wife was cheating. My son was stealing. My daughter had an eating disorder, and I'd had no idea about any of it. I was supposed to be the father, the husband, the one who noticed when something was wrong, but I'd been so wrapped up in my own work, my own concerns, that I'd missed every sign. The cameras had given me the truth, but the truth was unbearable. I had to decide what to do with this information, knowing that whatever I chose would change everything. There was no way to unknow what I'd learned, no way to go back to the comfortable ignorance I'd had 3 days ago. I spent the next week gathering more evidence before confronting anyone. I needed to understand the full scope of what was happening before I blew up our lives. I watched Claire meet with her affair partner 9 more times. I noticed she'd lost weight too, was wearing makeup and perfume on days she normally wouldn't. She was happy in a way I hadn't seen her in years, smiling at her phone, humming while she cooked dinner. Her joy came from betraying me, from whatever this other man gave her that I apparently didn't. I watched Ethan steal consistently, taking money every few days, always when he thought no one would notice. I tracked the amounts and realized he'd stolen nearly $800 in the past 2 months. I followed him on the cameras when he left the house, watched him walk to the end of our street where a car would pick him up. I couldn't see what happened inside the car, but the exchanges were quick and furtive. Drugs seemed most likely, though I had no proof. I watched Mia's eating disorder play out in painful detail. She'd eat normally at family dinners, then excuse herself to the bathroom. She'd open the refrigerator late at night, stare at food she wouldn't let herself have, close it again. She'd stand in front of the mirror in the hallway, pulling at her clothes, examining her body with disgust. Friday evening, 1 week after installing the cameras, I called a family meeting. Everyone gathered in the living room, confused because I never called family meetings. Claire sat on the couch next to Mia. Ethan slouched in the armchair, his phone in his hand. They all looked at me expectantly, waiting for whatever announcement I was about to make. I pulled out my laptop and set it on the coffee table. I need to show you all something. The cameras I installed have been recording everything, and I've learned some things this past week that we need to discuss as a family. The atmosphere in the room changed immediately. Ethan's face went pale. Claire's smile vanished. Mia's eyes widened with fear. They all knew they'd been caught. They just didn't know what I'd seen or how much I knew. I pulled up the footage of Claire and her affair partner kissing in the hallway. The timestamp was clear, showing it happened just 3 days ago. Claire made a choking sound, her hand flying to her mouth. Ethan and Mia stared at the screen, then at their mother, shock and confusion on their faces. "How long?" I asked, my voice steady, despite the rage burning in my chest. Claire opened her mouth, but no words came out. Tears started running down her face. "Answer me. How long have you been bringing him into our home?" She finally found her voice broken and small. 4 months. His name is Derek. He works for the pharmaceutical company that supplies our office. I never meant for this to happen. It just did. 4 months of lies. 4 months of betraying our marriage, our family, our home. I felt something inside me break, some fundamental trust that could never be repaired. But I wasn't done. I pulled up footage of Ethan stealing money from the kitchen drawer. His face appeared on the screen clear as day, taking the cash and pocketing it. $800 in 2 months. Where's it going, Ethan? My son's face was red now, his jaw clenched. He said nothing. I asked you a question. What are you spending $800 on? Ethan stood up, his hands balled into fists. You've been spying on us? Recording everything we do? What gives you the right? His deflection was pathetic. What gives me the right? I own this house. I pay for everything. And you're stealing from your own family. So I'll ask one more time. Where is the money going? Ethan's anger crumbled into something else, something that looked like shame and fear. I owe people money. I made some bets, online gambling, and it got out of control. I lost big, and the people I borrowed from aren't patient. They threatened me, said they'd hurt Mia if I didn't pay them back. So I took the money. I had to. The confession hung in the air. My son was in debt to dangerous people because of his own stupid choices, and instead of coming to me for help, he'd been stealing and putting himself in more danger. Claire looked horrified, reaching for Ethan, but he pulled away. I pulled up the footage of Mia at the refrigerator, then the audio of her in the bathroom. I didn't want to humiliate my daughter, but she needed to know that I knew, that her secret was out. Mia, baby, we need to talk about what's happening with you. Mia burst into tears, burying her face in her hands. I hate that you saw that. I hate this. I hate everything. Her pain was raw and real, and I wanted nothing more than to comfort her. But we were past comfort now. We were in crisis, and comfort wouldn't fix what was broken here. I closed the laptop and looked at my family. This is what those cameras revealed. In 1 week, I learned that my wife is having an affair, my son is stealing to pay gambling debts, and my daughter has an eating disorder. None of you came to me. None of you trusted me enough to tell me what was wrong. You all kept your secrets and let this family fall apart from the inside. My voice was rising now, anger and hurt pouring out. Do you understand what you've done? Do you understand how completely you've destroyed any trust we had? Claire stood up, her face streaked with tears. You're right to be angry. You're right about everything. But installing those cameras, invading our privacy, watching us without our knowledge, that's not okay either. You violated us. Her attempt to turn this around on me was infuriating. I installed cameras in my own home to figure out who was stealing. I had every right to do that. What I found was a family full of liars. Ethan stood up too, his voice loud. Maybe Mom wouldn't have cheated if you paid attention to her instead of working 60 hours a week. Maybe I wouldn't have started gambling if you'd been around to teach me better. Maybe Mia wouldn't hate herself if anyone in this family actually talked to each other. His words hit hard because there was truth in them. I had been working long hours. I had been distant, but that didn't excuse what they'd done, the choices they'd made. So this is my fault? Your mother's affair is my fault because I worked too much? Your gambling addiction is my fault because I wasn't holding your hand every second? Mia's eating disorder is my fault because I didn't notice fast enough? I was yelling now, something I rarely did, but the accusations were too much. You all made choices, adult choices with adult consequences, and now we have to deal with them. Claire grabbed her purse from the side table. I can't do this right now. I can't be in this house with those cameras watching everything I do, with you judging every move I make. I need space to think. She headed for the door, and I didn't stop her. Part of me hoped she'd leave and never come back, that this marriage that was clearly dead could just end. She paused at the door and looked back. Derek makes me feel alive. When I'm with him, I remember who I used to be before I became just a wife and mother. I'm sorry that hurts you, but I'm not sorry it happened. And she left, the door closing with a finality that echoed through the silent house. Ethan followed her out moments later, grabbing his jacket. I'm staying at Trevor's. I can't be here right now. That left me alone with Mia, who was still crying on the couch. I sat next to her and pulled her into my arms. She resisted at first, then collapsed against me, sobbing into my chest. I'm so sorry, Daddy. I didn't want you to find out like this. I didn't want anyone to know. I held her tight, my own tears finally coming. How long have you been making yourself sick? She took a shaky breath. Since last year, I got called fat by some girls at school and I just wanted to lose a little weight. But then I couldn't stop. Every time I eat, I feel disgusting. Every time I look in the mirror, I see someone who's too big, too ugly, too wrong. I know it's not rational, but I can't make it stop. Her pain was breaking my heart. My baby girl was suffering and I'd been too blind to see it. We're going to get you help. First thing Monday, we're finding you a therapist who specializes in eating disorders. This isn't your fault, sweetheart. These thoughts you're having, they're not the truth. You're beautiful and perfect, and we're going to help you see that again. Mia cried herself to sleep on the couch. I covered her with a blanket and went to my office, staring at the camera feeds that had caused all this destruction. I'd wanted the truth, and I'd gotten it. But the truth had revealed that my family was broken in ways I didn't know how to fix. My marriage was probably over. My son was in danger from loan sharks. My daughter was slowly killing herself, and the cameras that had exposed all of it now felt like a curse. I opened the security app and started deleting footage. Every saved video of Claire's affair, of Ethan's stealing, of Mia's pain. I couldn't watch it anymore. But deleting the footage didn't change what had happened. The damage was done. Claire didn't come home that night. She texted around midnight saying she was staying with her sister and would come by tomorrow to get some clothes. Ethan texted saying he was fine at Trevor's and not to worry. I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark living room watching my daughter sleep, wondering how I'd missed so many signs, how I'd let it get this bad. When morning came, I made breakfast that only Mia and I ate. She picked at her food, and I didn't push her to eat more. Didn't want to make the eating disorder worse by forcing food. Around 10, Claire came back with her sister Angela. Angela gave me a look of pure disgust as she passed, following Claire upstairs to pack. I heard them talking. Claire's voice explaining how I'd violated her privacy, how controlling I was, how she couldn't live under surveillance. The narrative was already shifting in her mind, making me the villain for discovering her affair instead of taking responsibility for having one. When they came back down with 2 suitcases, I stopped Claire at the door. You're really leaving? Just like that? No attempt to save our marriage or fix this? Claire looked at me with eyes that held no love anymore. Maybe hadn't for a long time. Our marriage has been over for years. We've just been going through the motions, pretending for the kids. The cameras didn't destroy our family. They just showed us what was already dead. Angela put her hand on Claire's shoulder. Come on, you don't need to explain yourself to him. They left, and I stood there feeling like my chest had been hollowed out. 18 years of marriage, gone in less than 24 hours. But I didn't have time to process my own pain. I had to figure out how to help my kids and deal with the immediate crisis of Ethan's gambling debts. I called Ethan around noon. He answered on the 5th ring, his voice groggy. What do you want? His hostility was clear, but I pushed through it. I need you to tell me exactly who you owe money to, and how much. If you're in danger, we need to handle this now. There was a long silence. Then Ethan said, $3,000 to a guy named Victor. He runs an online gambling operation that's not exactly legal. I started with small bets, sports games mostly, and I was winning at first. But then I started losing, and I kept betting bigger trying to win it back. Victor said I could take out loans through him, and the interest seemed reasonable at first, but it compounds weekly, and now I owe $3,000 and he's threatening to hurt Mia if I don't pay. $3,000 I didn't have, not without draining our emergency savings, but keeping Ethan and Mia safe was more important than any amount of money. Give me Victor's contact information. I'll handle this. Ethan gave me a phone number, and I called it immediately. A man answered with a rough voice. Who's this? I explained that I was Ethan's father, and that I wanted to settle his debt. Victor laughed. Your kid's into me for $3,000. You got that kind of cash? I can get it, but I need assurance that once I pay, my family is left alone. No more contact with my son, no more threats. Victor was quiet for a moment. You bring me $3,000 in cash, and your kid's debt is cleared. But if he ever bets with me again, the interest doubles. We clear? We arranged to meet that afternoon at a public place, a coffee shop downtown. I went to the bank and withdrew $3,000 in cash, feeling sick about enabling Ethan's addiction, but knowing I had no choice if dangerous people were threatening Mia. The meeting with Victor was brief and cold. He counted the cash, nodded, and said, We're square. Keep your kid away from my operation. Then he left, and I sat there with my hands shaking, realizing I'd just paid off my son's gambling debt to a criminal. When I got home, Ethan was waiting in the driveway. He'd seen my car and come over from Trevor's house. "Did you pay him?" I nodded. "Your debt is settled, but you need to understand something. You stole from your family, you put your sister in danger with your addiction, and instead of coming to me for help, you made everything worse. We're getting you into gambling addiction counseling, and you're going to pay me back every dollar through work. Do you understand?" Ethan's anger had deflated. He looked younger now, scared and ashamed. "I'm sorry. I know I messed up. I just got in so deep and didn't know how to get out." I put my hand on his shoulder. "Gambling addiction is real. It's a disease, and we're going to treat it like one. But you also have to take responsibility for your choices. You could have come to me at any point, but you didn't trust me enough. That's on both of us." We sat in the driveway and talked for an hour. Really talked for the first time in months. Ethan explained how the gambling had started as a way to make money, how the wins felt amazing and the losses felt devastating, how it spiraled until he couldn't stop. I explained how I felt learning what he'd done, the betrayal and fear mixed with love and concern. It wasn't resolution, but it was a start. That evening, I sat down with Mia and had a similar conversation about her eating disorder. She admitted she'd been terrified of gaining weight, that the control over her eating was the only thing in her life that felt manageable. I promised her we'd find help, that we'd face this together as a family, whatever that family looked like now. Monday morning, I made appointments. A therapist for Mia, who specialized in eating disorders, a counselor for Ethan, who dealt with addiction, a marriage counselor for Claire and me, though I doubted she'd show up. I also made an appointment for myself because I was drowning in guilt and anger and didn't know how to process any of it. The cameras were still installed, still recording, but I couldn't bring myself to watch the footage anymore. Knowing the truth had destroyed us, and I didn't want to know anything else. Claire filed for divorce 3 weeks later. She was living with Derek now, fully committed to her affair. The kids were devastated, and I was hollow inside. But we were all in therapy, all working on our individual problems while trying to figure out how to be a family again. Ethan was attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings and had been clean for a month. Mia was eating more consistently, though the eating disorder was far from resolved. She had good days and bad days, but we were monitoring it closely. I was learning in therapy that I'd been emotionally absent for years, that my focus on work had created distance between me and everyone I loved. The cameras had revealed symptoms, but the disease had been growing long before I installed them. The therapist I saw, Dr. Keller, asked me during our third session why I thought I'd missed all the signs. I told him about my work schedule, about being tired when I came home, about assuming everything was fine because no one said it wasn't. He leaned back in his chair and studied me. "You installed cameras to catch a thief, but what you really found was evidence of your own neglect. That's hard to face, isn't it?" The words stung, because they were true. I'd been so focused on providing financially for my family that I'd forgotten to actually be present in their lives. I'd thought working long hours made me a good father, a good husband, but all it had done was create distance. My family had been falling apart right in front of me, and I'd been too preoccupied to notice. Dr. Keller helped me understand that while I wasn't responsible for Claire's affair, or Ethan's gambling, or Mia's eating disorder, I'd created an environment where they didn't feel they could come to me with their problems. That realization was painful, but necessary if I wanted to rebuild anything with my kids. 3 months after installing the cameras, I was reviewing our finances to prepare for the divorce when I noticed something odd. There were charges on our joint credit card that I didn't recognize. Restaurant bills from places Claire and I had never been. Hotel charges from dates when she was supposedly at work. I added them up and realized Claire had been using our money to fund her affair with Derek. Dinners, hotel rooms, gifts, all paid for with our joint account while I'd been working overtime to keep us comfortable. The discovery added insult to injury. Not only had she betrayed me emotionally and physically, but she'd used our money to do it. I called my divorce attorney immediately and provided the credit card statements as evidence. My attorney explained that it strengthened our case for an unequal division of assets, since Claire had been spending marital funds on her extramarital relationship. During our next mediation session, I watched Claire's face when my attorney presented the evidence. She didn't deny the charges, couldn't deny them when the dates and amounts were printed right there. Instead, she said, "I deserved to be happy after years of you neglecting me. Those dinners and hotel rooms were compensation for all the nights you worked late, for all the anniversaries you forgot, for all the times you chose your job over me." Her justification was absurd, and my attorney shut it down immediately, but the words stayed with me. Yes, I had worked late. Yes, I had missed some anniversaries. But nothing justified what she'd done, how she'd done it, or using our money to fund her betrayal. The mediation became contentious after that, with Claire demanding half of everything despite the evidence of her financial misconduct. My attorney argued that her affair spending should be deducted from her share of the marital assets. We eventually settled on an arrangement where I kept the house and most of the savings. Claire took her car and her retirement account, and we split custody of the kids. Ethan, being 16, had more say in where he wanted to live and chose to stay with me full-time. Mia split her time evenly between us, though she struggled with the back and forth. The divorce was finalized 6 months after I installed the cameras. The legal end of our marriage was almost anticlimactic after everything that had come before. Claire moved in permanently with Derek, who'd broken up with his own girlfriend to be with her. I wondered how long that would last before the shine wore off and they realized their relationship was built on deception and stolen moments. 6 months after installing the cameras, I had them removed. They'd served their purpose, exposing the truth and forcing us to confront problems we'd all been hiding. But they'd also destroyed the illusion of our happy family, revealing the dysfunction underneath. The security company asked if I wanted to keep the footage backed up, and I said no. I wanted it all erased. Every second of video that showed my family falling apart. Ethan moved back home after 2 months at Trevor's. He was working 2 jobs to pay me back and attending community college part-time. The gambling counselor said he was making excellent progress, that the combination of therapy and Gamblers Anonymous was giving him tools to resist the urge to bet. He'd deleted all his gambling apps and given me control of his bank account so he couldn't access large amounts of cash. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was working. Mia was doing better too, though her recovery was slower and more complicated. She'd gained back some weight and was learning to have a healthier relationship with food, but the eating disorder was deeply ingrained. Her therapist warned me that recovery could take years and that relapses were common. Some days, Mia would eat 3 full meals and seem happy. Other days, she'd barely touch her food and spend hours in front of the mirror criticizing her reflection. Those hard days reminded me that healing isn't linear. Claire's relationship with Derek fell apart 8 months after our divorce was finalized. She called me crying one evening, saying he'd cheated on her with someone from his office. The irony wasn't lost on me that she'd been betrayed the same way she'd betrayed me. I didn't feel satisfaction or vindication, just a tired sort of sadness that she'd blown up our family for a man who couldn't remain faithful. She wanted sympathy, wanted me to tell her it would be okay, but I couldn't give her that. "You made your choices, Claire. You have to live with the consequences." She hung up on me, and I stood there holding my phone, realizing I felt nothing. No anger, no hurt, just emptiness where love used to be. The kids struggled with their mother's breakup. Mia, in particular, had a hard time understanding why her mother's relationship had ended so quickly when she'd destroyed our marriage for it. "Was it even worth it?" she asked me one night. I chose my words carefully. "Your mother made a choice she thought would make her happy. It didn't work out the way she hoped. But that's not your burden to carry. What happened between your mom and me? That's separate from her love for you." 1 year after installing the cameras, Ethan had paid back half the debt and was thriving at community college. He'd been accepted into a program at a 4-year university for the following fall, which felt like a real victory after everything he'd been through. His gambling counselor cleared him to manage his own finances again, though with continued oversight and regular check-ins. Ethan sat me down one evening and thanked me for handling his debt and getting him into treatment. I was in so deep I couldn't see a way out. If those cameras hadn't caught me stealing, I might have kept going until something really bad happened. I'm grateful you found out even though the way it happened was terrible. His gratitude meant more than I could express. Mia had a harder road. Her eating disorder was stubborn and persistent, but she was fighting it with everything she had. She'd joined a support group for teens with eating disorders and found community with others who understood what she was going through. Her therapist said the combination of individual therapy, group support, and family involvement was giving her the best chance at recovery. She still had bad days, but they were becoming less frequent. She'd started eating lunch at school again instead of skipping it. She could look in mirrors without immediately criticizing herself. Small victories that felt enormous given where we'd started. Claire eventually moved to another state for what she called a fresh start. The kids were upset about the distance, but she promised to visit regularly and maintained video calls with them several times a week. Her leaving felt like the final chapter closing on our old life together. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I'd never installed those cameras. Would Claire's affair have continued indefinitely? Would Ethan's gambling debt have grown until he got seriously hurt? Would Mia's eating disorder have progressed to the point of hospitalization? Or worse, the cameras had destroyed the comfortable fiction we'd all been living, but maybe that fiction needed to be destroyed. Maybe we were all better off facing hard truths than living comfortable lies. I thought about the moment I'd first reviewed that footage and seen Claire kissing a stranger in our hallway. The shock and devastation I'd felt watching my son steal from us. The horror of hearing my daughter making herself sick. Those moments had changed everything, had set off a chain reaction that ended my marriage and nearly destroyed my family. But they'd also forced us to confront problems that would have continued growing in the darkness. Dr. Keller asked me during one of our final sessions if I regretted installing the cameras. I thought about it for a long time before answering. I regret how everything happened. I regret that my family was in so much pain and I didn't notice without surveillance footage. I regret that I was so absent from their lives that they couldn't come to me with their problems. But do I regret learning the truth? No. The truth was devastating, but it was necessary. We couldn't heal from problems we were pretending didn't exist. He nodded approvingly. That's growth. That's acceptance of reality, instead of clinging to comfortable illusions. Your family is different now, but it's more honest. That's worth something. I held on to those words in the hard moments that followed, the moments when I missed the easy comfort of not knowing, of assuming everything was fine. The cameras had given me information I didn't want but desperately needed. They'd shown me that the family I thought I had was built on secrets and lies, that beneath the surface of our normal suburban life was dysfunction I'd been too distracted to see. 2 years after installing and removing the cameras, we'd rebuilt something real from the wreckage. Ethan graduated from community college and transferred to the university he'd been accepted to, debt-free and sober from gambling. Mia, now 15, was healthy and happy, working with her therapist but no longer in crisis. I'd been promoted at work, but negotiated for better hours, refusing to sacrifice my relationship with my kids for career advancement. We had family dinners 3 nights a week, where we actually talked to each other, shared what was happening in our lives, addressed problems instead of hiding them. The honesty was sometimes uncomfortable, but it was better than the alternative. Claire maintained regular contact with the kids, but we kept our interactions minimal and businesslike. The anger and hurt had faded, leaving mostly indifference. Sometimes I saw her at Mia's school events or Ethan's college visits, and we'd be cordial for our kids' sake, but there was no warmth between us. That marriage felt like something that had happened to different people in a different lifetime. The cameras sat in a box in my garage, disconnected and useless. Sometimes I'd walk past them and remember the night I'd installed them, how I'd felt like I was solving a problem and protecting my family. I'd been so naive thinking the only threat was from outside when the real damage was being done from within. Those cameras had been both a blessing and a curse, revealing truths that needed to be known while destroying the comfortable reality we'd all been maintaining. One evening, Mia asked me if I'd ever install cameras again if we had another theft. We were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, and the question seemed to come from nowhere. I thought about it carefully. I don't know. Part of me wishes I'd never seen what those cameras showed me. Part of me is grateful I did because it forced us to deal with real problems instead of ignoring them. But I think if something similar happened now, I'd talk to you guys first. Ask direct questions. Try to solve problems through communication instead of surveillance. She nodded thoughtfully. I'm glad you installed them. I know that sounds weird, but if you hadn't found out about my eating disorder, I don't know how bad it would have gotten. I was dying slowly and nobody noticed. The cameras saved my life, even though they destroyed our family. Her perspective shifted something in me. Maybe the cameras hadn't destroyed our family. Maybe they'd destroyed the illusion of family we'd been maintaining while revealing that we'd already been broken. You can't destroy something that's already dead. You can only expose the decay that was happening beneath the surface. The real destruction had been happening long before I installed those cameras. In every moment I'd chosen work over family. In every lie Claire had told about working late. In every dollar Ethan had stolen. In every meal Mia had forced herself to vomit. The cameras had just made the destruction visible, impossible to ignore or explain away. 3 years after installing the cameras, I could finally say we were truly healing. Not healed, because some wounds don't fully close, but healing in ways that felt genuine and sustainable. Ethan had a girlfriend he'd been honest with about his gambling addiction from the start. Mia had friends who supported her recovery and understood her struggles. I had learned to be present in my kids' lives, to notice warning signs, to ask hard questions, even when the answers might hurt. We'd rebuilt our family on honesty instead of comfortable lies, and while it wasn't the family we'd been, it was stronger and more real. The cameras had destroyed what we were, but they'd given us the chance to become something better. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.